Good morning and welcome back. Jane Austen fans, I'm a Jane Austen fan in training. I haven't got the quotes quite down. I haven't got it all down, but I'm training, so I am practicing. I'm working on it. And I did find out something rather disturbing yesterday because I looked into the aromatic vinegars that Edmund was going to give Fanny. We're Fanny fans here. Fanny fans. It's a fan. But this article was talking about those aromatic vinegars. It's called a vinaigrette. If a woman began to swoon in an airless room, or when she learned something unpleasant, a vinaigrette was pulled out of a reticule and waved under her nose. As a tiny metal box held, these tiny metal boxes held a sponge soaked in vinegar, perfumes oil, with a grill over the sponge to let the fumes out. And they would often put smelling salts so that women wouldn't faint. The sponge might alternatively be soaked in something sweet smelling like rose water or lavender water. Many places in the Regency era stank, and the sweet smell would help the lady tolerate them. Austen doesn't mention vinaigrettes, but she does mention smelling salts, and she did mention aromatic vinegars. And this, when I think about this, I think about how did we all make it? How did we all make it and survive? Because this did say aromatic vinegar in the minds of 17th to 19th century users had medicinal purposes for preventing infections and megrims or headaches. I didn't know that was a word for headache. But Fanny Banny Bobani had a headache, and Edmund was going to give her these, reviving a fainting person and covering bad odors. It was used to treat dropsy, croup, headaches, as well as sore throats. Vinegar teas were consumed by diabetics, and the liquid was used to heal wounds and fight infections. And that company bragged. This was like a brag statement. Vinegar was considered, okay, Vinegar was considered an indispensable item in the 18th century for arousing a fainting person or masking foul odors. A person stepping outside a crowded London street might carry aromatic soaked sponges to hold close to the nose to mask the odor of raw sewage and rotting garbage. You could put it in something really sweet and cute like that, though. I'd be down to carry around little aromatic vinegars and just toot in public and just spray that everywhere or whatever. If you're like, sorry, I tooted. Here, have this aromatic vinegar with smelling salts. Smelling salts are intense. Anyway, I don't know if Jane meant for people to like she didn't know that aromatic vinegars were ever going to go away, so she just put that in there because it was part of her life. But I am so interested in that now because we don't need that anymore because we have plumbing. God bless plumbing. People ask me sometimes what I'm grateful for because if I'm like always complaining, they're like, well, what are you grateful for? And I'm like, girl, I'm grateful for a house. I'm grateful for air conditioning. I'm grateful for heating. I'm grateful for being able to go to the store and buy mostly whatever I want except eggs because they're so expensive. I'm so grateful for the sun, and I'm grateful for rain. And I'm also grateful for, because I think about these things all the time. I'm grateful for plumbing, and I'm grateful for filtered water, and I'm grateful that we have hot showers, and I'm so grateful that we can like fill up a bathtub and I can take a bath, and then I don't have to save that water, and then my husband can take a different bath and we can fill that up. There's so much to be grateful for because we don't have to use aromatic vinegars, a vinaigrette, and smelling salts just to walk down the street because of the smell and the raw sewage and rotting garbage. And how did people make it? How did people just not die from Dysentery. How did everybody make it? How did we all make it? How did we all make it? Chapter 8 is chapter 9, IX, chapter 9 of this dirty, disgusting, rotten town. I did not like Fanny Dashwood, but I am liking Fanny Price. I'm liking her. She's a quiet, pensive person. She's treated poor by her terrible stepsisters, but they're cousins, but they're evil stepsisters, and they're absolutely indolent Lady Bertram, and absolutely absent Sir Thomas. So here we are. What happened last time? Mr. Rush was... Oh, everybody's going, oh, yeah. Fanny got to go. God bless Edmund. Fanny got to go on this trip, and they finally just made it to Mr. Rushworth's house. Mr. Rushworth was at the door to receive his fair lady, and the whole party were welcomed by him with due attention. In the drawing-room they were met with equal cordiality by the mother, and Miss Bertram had all the distinction with each that she could wish. After the business of arriving was over, the business of arriving... That's funny. It was first necessary to eat. She's getting playful. This is fun. Jane, you little playful minx. The business of arriving is over. First necessary to eat. And the doors were thrown open to admit them through one or two intermediate rooms into the appointed dining parlour. Where a collation was prepared with abundance and elegance. Thank you for food. Thank you for food. Much was said, and much was ate, and all went well. This is starting out to be a very fun and playful chapter, and I like that sentence. Much was said, and much was ate, and all went well. Period. We sat, we said, girl, we ate. It was fine. The particular object of the day was then considered. How would Mr. Crawford like, in what manner would he choose, to take a survey of the grounds? Ooh, Mr. Rushworth mentioned his curricle. Mr. Crawford suggested the greater desirableness of some carriage which might convey more than two. To be deprived themselves of the advantage of other eyes, and other judgments, might be an evil beyond the loss of present pleasure. An evil, even beyond the loss of present pleasure. Heavy. Mrs. Rushworth proposed that the chaise should be taken also, but this was scarcely received as an amendment. The young ladies neither smiled nor spoke. Her next proposition of showing the house to such of them as had not been there before was more acceptable, for Miss Bertram was pleased to have its size displayed, and all were glad to be doing something. They said, we just got here. We are in a food coma. I don't know about going out and, like, surveying grounds, but we are happy to be doing something. All were glad to be doing something. Fun. The whole party rose accordingly, and under Mrs. Rushworth's guidance was shown through a number of rooms, all lofty, and many large, and amply furnished in taste of 50 years back, with shining floors, solid mahogany, rich damask, marble, gilding, and carving, each handsome in its way. Of pictures in its 50 years ago way. That's funny. 50 years back. Of pictures there were abundance, and some few good, but the larger part were family portraits, no longer anything to anybody but Mrs. Rushworth, who had been at great pains to learn all that the housekeeper could teach, and was now almost equally well qualified to show the house. Oh, because usually the housekeeper showed the house. Wow. For all the romanticizing we do of this time, because the outfits are great and the hats are great, and these are even like middle class people trying to marry up, there were people not doing well. There were housekeepers and maids and cooks, and who knows where they lived and what their life was like, how many aromatic salts they needed. You just never know. The housekeeper. Do they all live there? What do they make? What do they make? That's why I guess I liked, the Downton Abbey, because you got to see some of that. You got to see that, which is interesting to me. On the present occasion, she addressed herself chiefly to Miss Crawford and Fanny. Interesting. But there was no comparison in the willingness of their attention, for Miss Crawford, who had seen scores of great houses and cared for none of them, had only the appearance of civilly listening, while Fanny, to whom everything was almost as interesting as it was new, attended with affected earnestness to all that Mrs. Rushworth could relate of the family in former times, its rise and grandeur, regal visits and loyal efforts, delighted to connect anything with history already known, or warm her imagination with scenes of the past. Nice, Fanny. I'm a Fanny fan. Any Fanny fans out there, you're in the right place. Humble. The situation of the house excluded the possibility of much prospect from any of the rooms, and while Fanny and some of the others were attending Mrs. Rushworth, Henry Crawford was looking grave and shaking his head at the windows. Every room on the west front looked across the lawn to the beginning of the avenue, immediately beyond tall iron palisades and gates. Having visited many more rooms that could be supposed to be of any other use than to contribute to the window tax and find employment for housemaids. Window tax? Is there a window tax? Having visited many more rooms that could be supposed to be of any other use than to contribute to the window tax. Or is she just being funny? Oh my gosh, the window tax. Window tax, England, Regency. This tax was calculated based on the number of windows in a dwelling, with higher rates for houses with more windows. But this was in 1696. Regency era. Oh my God. The window tax, a property tax based on the number of windows in a house, was a significant feature of Regency-era England, introduced in 1696 and lasting until 1851. No wonder the Americans revolted. No wonder people went over and were like, no, we're not going to do a window tax. That's why those fenced-in porches are there in the South. They said, it's going to be all windows, and there's going to be no tax. That's crazy. It was intended to be a progressive tax, meaning those with more windows and thus potentially greater wealth would pay more. That makes sense. However, its impact was often uneven, leading to measures like boarding up windows and even building new homes with fewer windows to avoid the tax. Get out of town. Get out. That is crazy. Wow, I did not know that. Did people just, what? Impact on the poor. The tax disproportionately affected the poor, particularly in urban areas where large tenement buildings were taxed as tenement buildings were taxed as a single property. That's terrible. Wow. Wow. Having visited many more rooms that could be supposed to be of any other use than to contribute to the window tax. Oh my God. And find employment for housemaids. Now, said Mrs. Rushworth, we are coming to the chapel, which properly we ought to enter from above and look down upon. But as we are quite among friends, I will take you in this way, if you will excuse me. They entered. Fanny's imagination had prepared her for something grander than a mere spacious oblong room fitted up for the purpose of devotion, with nothing more striking or more solemn than the profusion of mahogany and the crimson velvet cushions appearing over the ledge of the family gallery above. I am disappointed, said she in a low voice to Edmund. This is not my idea of a chapel. There's nothing awful here, nothing melancholy, nothing grand. There are no aisles, no arches, no inscriptions, no banners, cousin, to be blown by the night wind of heaven, no signs that a Scotch monarch sleeps below. You forget, Fanny, how lately all this has been built, and for how confined a purpose compared to the old chapels of castles and monasteries. It was only the private use of the family. They have been buried, I suppose, in the parish church. There, you must look for the banners and achievements. And there you must look for the banners and the achievements. In the parish church. It was foolish of me not to think of all that, but I am disappointed. I am a fool, but I'm also disappointed. Mrs. Rushworth began her relation. This chapel was fitted up as you see it in James II's time. Before that period, as I understand, the pews were only wainscot. Okay, James II, when was James II? I don't know English monarch history. The second. He was king from 1685 to 1688. He was known as James VII of Scotland. Ended with the Glorious Revolution in 1688. There have just always been wars and revolution. And it's just always happening. That's lavender spray for that. Just sad. And then we need to know what we meaning me, but hopefully you guys too. You're not like, just keep reading. A wainscot. I don't know what that is. Wainscot. What is it? Wainscot. Oh, wainscoting refers to the paneling or wooden lining applied to the lower part of interior wall, often in a room. Oh. Like a little wooden decoration. This looks very old-fashioned. Something like this. Yes. Okay. You forget, Fanny, how lately it was built. Blah, 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 blah. Old chapels, castles, Mrs. Rushworth. Here we are. This chapel was fitted up as you see it in James II's time. Before that period, as I understand, the pews were only wainscot. And there is some reason to think that the linings and cushions of the pulpit and family seat were only purple cloth. But this is not quite certain. It is a handsome chapel and was formerly in constant use both morning and evening. Prayers were always read in it by the domestic chaplain within the memory of many, but the late Mr. Rushworth left it off. Every generation has its improvements, said Miss Crawford with a smile to Edmund. Mrs. Rushworth was gone to repeat her lesson to Mr. Crawford, and Edmund, Fanny, and Miss Crawford remained in a cluster together. It is a pity, cried Fanny, that the custom should have been discontinued. It was a valuable part of former times. There is something in a chapel and chaplains so much in character with a great house, and one's idea of what such a household should be. A whole family assembling regularly for the purpose of prayer is fine. She loves a little ritual, she loves a little daily ritual, Fanny Bobanny. Fanny Dashwood, Fanny Price, nice. Very fine indeed, said Miss Crawford, laughing. It must do the heads of the family a great deal of good to force all the poor housemaids and footmen to leave business and pleasure, and say their prayers here twice a day, while they are inventing excuses themselves for staying away. That is hardly Fanny's idea of a family assembling, said Edmund. If the master and mistress do not attend themselves, there must be more harm than good in the custom. At any rate, it is safer to leave people to their own devices on such subjects. Everybody likes to go their own way, to choose their own time and manner of devotion. The obligation of attendance, the formality, the restraint, the length of time, altogether it is a formidable thing, and what nobody likes. And if the good people who used to kneel and gape in that gallery could have foreseen that the time would ever come when men and women might lie another 10 minutes in bed, when they woke with a headache without a danger of reprobation because chapel was missed, they would have jumped with joy and envy. Cannot you imagine with what unwilling feelings the former belles of the house of Rushworth did many a time to repair this chapel? The young Mrs. Eleanors and Mrs. Bridgets, starched up into seeming piety, but with heads full of something very different, especially if the poor chaplain were not worth looking at. And in those days I fancy parsons were very inferior even to what they are now. She's got quite a lot to say about the subject. And if only people could just lie in bed for 10 more minutes instead of having to go to an obligatory devotion. For a few minutes she was unanswered. Fanny coloured and looked at Edmund, but felt too angry for speech, and he needed a little recollection before he could say, "Your lively mind can hardly be serious even on serious subjects. You have given us an amusing sketch, and human nature cannot say it was not so. We must all feel at times the difficulty of fixing our thoughts as we could wish. But if you are supposing it is a frequent thing, that is to say, a weakness grown into a habit from neglect, what could we expect from the private devotions of such persons? Do you think the minds which are indulged in wanderings in a chapel, would be more collected in a closet?" Oh, this is deep religious discourse. "Yes, very likely. They would have 2 chances at least in their favor. There would be less to distract the attention from without, and it would not be tried so long. The mind which does not struggle against itself under one circumstance would find objects to distract it in the other, I believe, and the influence of the place and of example may often rouse better feelings that are begun with. The greater length of service, however, I admit to be sometimes too hard a stretch upon the mind. One wishes it would not so, but I have not yet left Oxford long enough to forget what chapel prayers are." While this was passing, the rest of the party being scattered about the chapel, Julia called Mr. Crawford's attention to her sister by saying, "Do look at Mr. Rushworth and Maria standing side by side, exactly as if the ceremony were going to be performed. Have not they completely the air of it?" Mr. Crawford smiled his acquiescence, and stepping forward to Maria, said in a voice which she only could hear, "I do not like to see Miss Bertram so near the altar." Starting, the lady instinctively moved a step or two, but recovering herself in a moment, affected to laugh, and asked him in a tone not much louder if he would give her away. "I am afraid I should do it very awkwardly," was his reply, with a look of meaning. Julia, joining them at the moment, carried on the joke. "Upon my word, it is really a pity that it should not take place directly. If we had but a proper license, for here we are all together, and nothing in the world could be more snug and pleasant." And she talked and laughed about it with so little caution as to catch the comprehension of Mr. Rushworth and his mother, and expose her sister to the whispering gallantries of her lover, while Mrs. Rushworth spoke with proper smiles and dignity of its being a most happy event to her whenever it took place. "If Edmund were but in orders," cried Julia, and running to where he stood with Miss Crawford and Fanny. "My dear Edmund, if you were but in orders now, you might perform the ceremony directly. How unlucky that you are not ordained. Mr. Rushworth and Maria are quite ready." Miss Crawford's countenance, as Julia spoke, might have amused a disinterested observer. She looked almost aghast under the new idea she was receiving. Fanny pitied her. How distressed she would be at what she said just now, passed across her mind. I feel like this novel is doing more like what people are thinking in quotations. It's different. Interesting. "Ordained," said Miss Crawford. "What, are you to be a clergyman?" "Yes, I shall take orders soon after my father's return, probably at Christmas." Miss Crawford, rallying her spirits and recovering her complexion, replied only, "If I had known this before, I would have spoken of the cloth with more respect," and turned the subject. The chapel was soon afterwards left to the silence and stillness which reigned in it, with few interruptions throughout the year. The chapel was soon afterwards left to the silence and stillness which reigned in it, with few interruptions throughout the year. Miss Bertram, displeased with her sister, led the way, and all seemed to feel that they had been there long enough. The lower part of the house had been now entirely shown, and Mrs. Rushworth, never weary in the cause, would have proceeded towards the principal staircase and taken them through all the rooms above, if her son had not interposed with a doubt of there being time enough. "For if," said he, with a sort of self-evident proposition which many a clearer head does not always avoid, "we are too long going over the house, we shall not have time for what is to be done out of doors. It is past 2, and we are to dine at 5. Mrs. Rushworth submitted, and the question of surveying the grounds with the who and the how was likely to be more fully agitated, and Mrs. Norris was beginning to arrange by what junction of carriages and horses most could be done, when the young people, meeting with an outward door, temptingly open on a flight of steps which led immediately to turf and shrubs, and all the sweets of pleasure grounds, as by one impulse, one wish for air and liberty, all walked out. One wish for air and liberty. "Suppose we turn down here for the present," said Mrs. Rushworth, civilly taking the hint and following them. "Here are the greatest number of our plants, and here are the curious pheasants." "Query," said Mr. Crawford, looking round him, "whether we might not find something to employ us here before we go farther. I see the walls of great promise. Mr. Rushworth, shall we summon a council on this lawn?" "James," said Mrs. Rushworth to her son, "I believe the wilderness will be new to all the party. The Miss Bertrams have never seen the wilderness yet." The wilderness. No objection was made, but for some time there seemed no inclination to move in any plan, or to any distance. All were attracted at first by the plants, or the pheasants, and all dispersed about in happy independence. Mr. Crawford was the first to move forward to examine the capabilities of that end of the house. The lawn, bounded on each side by a high wall, contained beyond the first planted area a bowling green, and beyond the bowling green a long terrace walk, backed by iron palisades and commanding a view over them into the tops of the trees of the wilderness immediately adjoining. It was a good spot for a fault-finding. Mr. Crawford was soon followed by Miss Bertram and Mr. Rushworth, and when, after a little time, the others began to form into parties, these three were found in busy consultation on the terrace by Edmund, Miss Crawford, and Fanny, who seemed as naturally to unite, and who, after a short participation of their regrets and difficulties, left them and walked on. The remaining three, Mrs. Rushworth, Mrs. Norris, and Julia, were still far behind, for Julia, whose happy star no longer prevailed, was obliged to keep by the side of Mrs. Rushworth, and restrain her impatient feet to that lady's slow pace. My impatient feet. To that lady's slow pace, while her aunt, having fallen in with the housekeeper, who was come out to feed the pheasants, was lingering behind and gossip with her. Wow. Poor Julia, the only one out of the 9 not tolerably satisfied with their lot, was now in a state of complete penance, and as different from the Julia of the baroche box as could well be imagined. Right. The politeness which she had been brought up to practice as a duty made it impossible for her to escape, while the want of that higher species of self-command, that just consideration of others, that knowledge of her own heart, that principle of right, which had not formed any essential part of her education, made her miserable under it. This whole thing, actually, this whole paragraph has been fun to read. This is insufferably hot, said Miss Crawford, when they had taken one turn on the terrace and were drawing a second time to the door in the middle, which opened to the wilderness. Shall any of us object to being comfortable? Here is a nice little wood, if one can but get into it. What happiness if the door should not be locked, but of course it is. For in these great places the gardeners are the only people who can go where they like. Jealous of a gardener. The door, however, proved not to be locked, and they were all agreed in turning joyfully through it, and leaving the unmitigated glare of day behind. Unmitigated glare of day. Golly, I'm seeing it more and more now. Just the chef's kiss of this writing. The unmitigated glare of the day. A considerable flight of steps landed them in the wilderness, which was a planted wood of about 2 acres, and though chiefly of larch and laurel and beech cut down, and though laid out with too much regularity, was darkness and shade and natural beauty compared with the bowling green and the terrace. They all felt the refreshment of it, and for some time could only walk and admire. At length, after a short pause, Miss Crawford began with, "So you are to be a clergyman, Mr. Bertram? That is rather a surprise to me." Why should it surprise you? It's one of 2 professions I could be. According to Jane Austen. Lots of clergymen in her books. Go research that if you need something to research. That's interesting. Lots of articles about all the clergymen of Jane Austen's books. Why should it surprise you? You must suppose me designed for some profession, and might perceive that I am neither a lawyer, nor a soldier, nor a sailor. Very true, but in short it had not occurred to me, and you know there is generally an uncle or grandfather to leave a fortune to the second son. A very praiseworthy practice, said Edmund, but not quite universal. I am one of the exceptions, and being one, must do something for myself. But why are you to be a clergyman? I thought that was always the lot of the youngest, where there were many to choose before him. Do you think the church itself never chosen, then? Never is a black word, but yes, in the never of conversation, which means not very often, I do think it. For what is to be done in the church? Men love to distinguish themselves, and in either of the other lines distinction may be gained, but not in the church. A clergyman is nothing. The nothing of conversation has its gradations, I hope, as well as the never. The nothing of conversation has its gradations, I hope, as well as the never. A clergyman cannot be high in state or fashion. He must not head mobs, or set the tongue ton in dress. I don't know what that means. I'm going to look that up. He must not head mobs or set the ton in dress, ton, like town. But I cannot call that situation nothing, which has the charge of all that is the first importance of mankind, individually or collectively considered, temporal and eternally, which has the guardianship of religions and morals, and consequently of the manners which result from their influence. No one here can call the office nothing. If the man who holds it is so, it is that by the neglect of his duty, by foregoing its just importance, and stepping out of his place to appear what he ought not to appear. You assign greater consequence to the clergyman than one has been used to hear given, or than I can quite comprehend. One does not see much of this influence and importance in society, and how can it be acquired where they are so seldom seen themselves? How can 2 sermons a week, even supposing them worth hearing, supposing the preacher to have the sense to prefer Blair's to his own, do all that you speak of? What is that? Govern the conduct of fashion, the manners of a large congregation for the rest of the week. Only scarcely sees a clergyman out of his pulpit. You are speaking of London. I am speaking of the nation at large. The metropolis, I imagine, is a pretty fair sample of the rest. Not, I should hope, of the proportion of virtue to vice throughout the kingdom. We do not look in great cities for our best morality. It is not there that respectable people of any denomination can do most good, and it certainly is not there that the influence of the clergy can be most felt. A fine preacher is followed and admired, but it is not in fine preaching only that a good clergyman will be useful in his parish and his neighbourhood. Where the parish and neighbourhood are a size capable of knowing his private character and observing his general conduct, which in London can rarely be the case. The clergy are lost in the crowds of their parishioners. They are known to the largest part only as preachers, and with regard to their influencing public manners, Miss Crawford must not misunderstand me, or suppose I mean to call them the arbiters of good breeding, the regulators of refinement and courtesy, the masters of the ceremonies of life. The manners I speak of might rather be called conduct, be perhaps the result of good principles, the effect, in short, of those doctrines which it is their duty to teach and recommend, and it will, I believe, be everywhere found, that as the clergy are, or are not, what they ought to be, so are the rest of the nation. Certainly, said Fanny, with gentle eagerness. There, cried Miss Crawford, you have quite convinced Miss Price already. I wish I could convince Miss Crawford, too. I do not think you ever will, said she, with an arch smile. I am just as much surprised now as I was at first that you should intend to take orders. You really are fit for something better. Come, do change your mind. It is not too late. Go into the law. She's not listening. She's just waiting for her turn to speak. Miss Crawford. Mary. Go into law with as much ease as I was told to go into this wilderness. Now you are going to say something about the law being the worst wilderness of the two, but I forestall you. Remember, I have forestalled you. You need not hurry when the subject is only to prevent my saying bon mot. What? Bon mot. It's French, I'm certain, and I'm not saying it right. French is hard. Bon mot. A clever or witty remark, witticism, or clever saying. It's a French term that literally translates to good word. In essence, bon mot is a lighthearted and amusing remark, often characterized by ingenuity or verbal skill. Ooh, pronunciation, please. A video.
This expression, as well as to say more interesting but often confusing expressions, including from French, that many mispronounced, so make sure to stay tuned to the channel. For reference, in French it is said as bon mot.
Bon
mot, meaning good word.
Bon mot. Bon mot. Bon mot. Good word. You need not hurry when the object is only to prevent my saying a bon mot. For there is not the least wit in my nature. I am a very matter-of-fact, plain-spoken being, and may blunder on the borders of a repartee for half an hour together without striking it out. A general silence succeeded. Each was thoughtful. Fanny made the first interruption by saying, I wonder that I should be tired with only walking in this sweet wood. But the next time we come to a seat, if it is not disagreeable to you, I should be glad to sit down for a while. My dear Fanny, cried Edmund, immediately drawing her arm within his, how thoughtless I have been. I hope you are not very tired, perhaps. Turning to Miss Crawford, my other companion may do me the honour of taking an arm. Thank you, but I am not tired at all. She took it, however, as she spoke, and the gratification of having her do so, of feeling such a connection for the first time, made him a little forgetful of Fanny. You scarcely touch me, said he. You do not make me of any use. What a difference in the weight of a woman's arm from that of a man's. At Oxford I have been a good deal used to have a man lean on me for the length of a street, and you are only a fly in the comparison. I am not really tired, which I almost wonder at, for we must have walked at least a mile in this wood. Do not you think we have? Not half a mile, was his sturdy answer. For he was not yet so much in love as to measure distance or reckon time with feminine lawlessness. He was not so much in love yet to be a silly woman. That's so funny. Or reckon time with feminine lawlessness. Oh, you do not consider how much we have wound about. We have taken such a very serpentine course, and the wood itself must be half a mile long in a straight line, for we have never seen the end of it yet since we left the first great path. But if you remember, before we left that first great path, we saw directly to the end of it. We looked down the whole vista and saw its closed iron gates, and it could not have been more than a furlong in length. I don't know what a furlong is. I gotta figure it out, and I gotta look it up. A furlong. I did promise myself I was going to get a dictionary, and I still haven't gotten one yet. A furlong, a unit of distance equal to an eighth of a mile, 220 yards or 201 meters. It's primarily used in horse racing to measure race distances. A furlong is the length of a furrow in a field. Thank you, digital dictionary. Oh, I know nothing of your furlongs. Thank you very much, Miss Crawford. But I am sure it is a very long wood, and that we have been winding in and out ever since we came into it, and therefore, when I say that we have walked a mile in it, I must speak within compass. We have been exactly a quarter of an hour here, said Edmund, taking out his watch. Do you think we are walking 4 miles in an hour? Oh, do not attack me with your watch. A watch is always too fast or too slow. It cannot be dictated to by... I cannot be dictated to by a watch. This is getting fun. This is fun. It's always too fast or too slow. A few steps farther brought them out at the bottom of the very walk they had been talking of, and standing back, well shaded and sheltered, and looking over a ha-ha into the park. Looking over a ha-ha. All of a sudden, I have so much to look up. Looking over a ha-ha? What's that mean? Looking over a ha-ha means standing at the edge of a sunken fence or boundary feature in a garden or landscape, often with an unobstructed view beyond the boundary. The term ha-ha refers to the exclamation of surprise one might make upon encountering a feature as it appears hidden until close up. A ha-ha! It's a ha-ha. And looking over a ha-ha into the park was a comfortable-sized bench on which they all sat down. I am afraid you are very tired, Fanny, said Edmund, observing her. Why would you not speak sooner? This will be a bad day's amusement for you if you are to be knocked up. Every sort of exercise fatigues her so soon, Miss Crawford, except riding. How abominable in you, then, to let me engross her house as I did all last week. I am ashamed of you and of myself, but it shall never happen again. Your attentiveness and consideration makes me more sensible of my own neglect. Fanny's interest seems in safer hands with you than with me. That she should be tired now, however, gives me no surprise, for there is nothing in the course of one's duties so fatiguing as what we have been doing this morning, seeing a great house, dawdling from one room to another, straining one's eyes and one's attention, hearing what one does not understand, admiring what one does not care for. It is generally allowed to be the greatest bore in the world, and Miss Price has found it so, though she did not know it. I shall soon be rested, said Fanny. To sit in the shade on a fine day and look upon verdure is the most perfect refreshment. I learned about verdure from Pride and Prejudice. It's like early spring flower budding, verdure, the greenage. After sitting a little while, Miss Crawford was again up. I must move, said she. Resting fatigues me. I have looked across the ha-ha till I am weary. I must go and look through that iron gate at the same view without being able to see it so well. Edmund left the seat likewise. Now, Miss Crawford, if you will look up the wall, you will convince yourself that it cannot be a half-mile long, or a half a mile. It is an immense distance, said she. I see that with a glance. He still reasoned with her, but in vain. She would not calculate. She would not compare. She would only smile and assert. The greatest degree of rational consistency could not have been more engaging, and they talked with mutual satisfaction. At last it was agreed that they should endeavour to determine the dimensions of the wood by walking a little more about it. They would go to one end of it in the line they were then in, for there was a straight green walk along the bottom of the side of the ha-ha, and perhaps turn a little way in some other direction, if it seemed likely to assist them, and be back in a few minutes. Fanny said she was rested and would have moved too, but this was not suffered. Edmund urged her remaining where she was with an earnestness which she could not resist, and she was left on the bench to think with pleasure of her cousin's care, but with great regret that she was not stronger. She watched them till they had turned the corner, and listened till all the sound of them had ceased. Wow, that sun. Look at that. That's incredible. Long chapter today. We are challenging our attention spans, and if you're still with me, feel free to pause at any moment, obviously, and take a break whenever you need. But thank you for sticking with me, sticking around to hear about Fanny and Mansfield Park, and this was a fun chapter for me personally. Wow, there's angels. God bless angels. Happy reading, everybody, and ta-ta!